Such a fun story. Wouldn't you think if you went back home and you had done nothing wrong, isn't the usual vibe of when you go back home to your hometown? I mean, how many of you actually don't live in your hometown? Anybody here not live in their hometown? Yeah, so you don't live in your hometown. So, when you go back to your hometown, isn't the vibe sort of okay, among the grown-ups, the people who taught you, your neighbors, other people? Isn't it kind of like, yeah, good for you, good to see you, they wish you well. So, think about how ordinarily, if someone does well or grows up or something, we're all cheering for you a little bit. And in this story, it starts out this way. The hometowners of Nazareth are impressed by Jesus. They say, wow, he's wise, amazing. He's able to heal. So they're in this headspace of amazement and cool and positiveness. And then all of a sudden, they start thinking, wait a minute, isn't this the carpenter? And I love Mark. Mark calls him the carpenter. Matthew calls him the carpenter's son. But Mark's like, isn't this the carpenter? Isn't this Mary's kid? I know his brother. I know his sister. And that knowledge of the past kind of clouds their brain, and they have a change of heart about how they perceive Jesus, and they reject him. What? That is so strange. And then Jesus says, well, prophets aren't accepted in their hometown. They're honored every other place, but not in their hometown. And then it says that Jesus could do no deed of power there. Jesus suffers a power loss back in Nazareth. And I'm trying to think if that happens in any other place in the Bible, that Jesus powers down. I mean, in his death and arrest and things like that, we see that as willing. But this one just seems kind of like a loss. And then Jesus ends with being amazed at their disbelief. Whew. Disbelief. Just really amazed Jesus. Such an interesting place for disbelief. So let's take a look at that mind change that the people of Nazareth experienced. Again, wouldn't you think someone comes back into town and they're doing pretty well for themselves? Wouldn't you be cheering? Wouldn't they be in the parade? Come on. Wouldn't they be on the sign outside of town? Warren, he gets his own weekend every single year, right? What does it take? Do you have to be an athlete, a movie star, a billionaire, and people are on board? Is it that Jesus was a prophet? Is that the game changer? I loved hearing you wrestle with what was up with this. Jealousy? Or was it kind of a mind narrowing? They just couldn't figure out what to make of Jesus. But CEB even says that, a different translation, that they were repulsed by Jesus and they fell into sin. I mean, that's pretty extreme. So, yeah, what was going on there with them? Not cloud. It also made me wonder, what was going on with Jesus? What were Jesus' expectations going back to the hometown? Were his expectations high or normal? Like, oh, I'm going back, I get to see the neighbors, it'll be so good to be with them. He does go to the synagogue and he does teaching. Apparently he has some healing going on there. I just wonder if initially he felt such great vibes, and then all of a sudden it goes south. Somewhere in their brains they had a change, and Jesus could sense it. How did Jesus feel? Did he wonder, am I doing something wrong here? Am I too big for my britches? Do I look like a snob? Am I self-deceived? Do I need to rethink this? I mean, how would you feel if the people who raised you, who are your teachers, your neighbors, your supporters, then did not support you, cast dispersions on you? How would that feel? Did Jesus suddenly feel undermined? Did he feel crazy? Did he feel disappointed? Like, really, these guys? Was he really, really disappointed in them? I wonder if he felt angry. Like, really, people? Why are you behaving like this? You know, how disempowering to lose your powers. That's what happened to Jesus. The disbelief cloud minimized his powers. And then I wonder if Jesus felt frustrated. I mean, it's such a lose-lose. Jesus lost his powers, and then the community lost the power of being healed. I mean, that's just dumb. Very disappointing. I wonder if Jesus thought about quitting. That made me think of the vibe that's kind of in our society these days. You know, people who are trying to do the right thing, but then they're met with disbelief from others, from whom they should expect trust and support of. I wonder if that's a bit of the vibe for teachers these days, for people in medical fields, for librarians. You know, you just want to do your job. But there's this weird cloud of undermining and mistrust in our divided society. And it eats at you and it sucks away. And I think it's created a tier of people who retire early or quit, you know, a serving profession altogether. Because it's so hard to operate when there's disbelief. It is a toxic thing. It's like kryptonite to doing things, wherever you are. It's so hard. So what do? I'm really interested in Jesus' response. When this spiral of negativity is happening, Jesus quotes a proverb. A prophet is honored, except in their hometown, among their relatives, in their own house. So what does that mean, first of all? And we don't know 100% what it means. It kind of reminds me of what people used to say about businesses or wherever you are, wherever you work, and you have a consultant come in, and you know what a consultant is? I think a definition was someone from outside of town with a briefcase, you know, because you needed somebody from outside your system to come in and be wise. So is it that kind of dynamic? They're like, how could it be? So, you know, we're not 100%, excuse me. It's that time of year we're all like clearing our throats. Oh, prayers for Alberta, right? The smoke coming in. I think it's dispersing. So Jesus quotes a proverb. So maybe, you know, we can kind of like sort out what that meaning of that proverb is. When I thought about his quoting of that proverb, it reminded me of something we've talked about before. And maybe once a year, we should trot this idea out. It comes from Stoicism. So, Stoicism. Stoicism is an ancient philosophy. It flourished from 300 BC through 300 AD, so it was around during Jesus' times. And it was a philosophy that helped you look at life, especially the silliness, dare I say, the stupid parts of life. So a famous practitioner of Stoicism was Marcus Aurelius, and I've used this quote before, but how about we take another look at it again? Let's see. Oops, see if we can find that PowerPoint. Is it there in the mix somewhere? And I can kind of quote it. I can do a hack quote of it. But he says, let me know when it appears. He says, start pointing, I'll watch you. He says that today I will face insolence, I will face interference, I will face rudeness, I will face ignorance, I will face all manner, I'm going to use a strong word, stupid. Today I will face all manner of stupid. And so he's like, it's not a bad thing. There it is. Today I shall be met with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness. Say it to yourself. Today is the day. Today is that day. And so Stoicism dials back our expectations. Before we fly off the handle, before we sink into disappointment, we say, I work with humans. I live with humans. It's the price we pay for being in community with one another. And even ourselves, some of that interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, selfishness, ill will is within ourselves. We face it within ourselves. And hopefully as people who follow Christ, we have disciplines of light and grace that help us do the homework of recognizing that within ourselves. And then the next step is recognizing it within human interactions, no matter what. And it could be anybody. And it's especially biting when it comes from someone that you think ought to know better, which I think is where Jesus was in Nazareth. But there it is, folks. There it is. Does that piece of wisdom help us from not quitting, not throwing in the towel, not spiraling, not sinking into despair or depression or violence? Acceptance. I am human. I live among humans. It is what it is. And I think that was Jesus' little proverb there. They're hometowners. They can't help it. They can't help it. And I think this kind of a thing is a form of judgment. I've talked about this before. We don't want to be judgy people and judge and put people down, but there is good judgment. Good judgment. And good judgment is a form of wisdom, and it's a form of discernment. We are given the powers to discern whether something is right and wrong. Hopefully Bible study, coming to church helps us have a toolkit for figuring those things out, and there's gray areas. Because the second part of Marcus Aurelius' quote is that one there too? Is it in the queue? Oops. Nope. And all of that crazy, all of these unhelpful things are due to the offender's ignorance of what is good and what is evil. So, it just helps us say there's all manner of stupid and crazy and disbelief. Yeah, it's a thing. It's in the room. It's within us. And when that happens, it's because of ignorance about good and evil. So Jesus was able to, use that as a wedge and keep moving. He kept moving because you know what? He is busy. He doesn't have time for that kind of stuff. I read ahead in Mark 6. The next thing Jesus does is send the 12 out to do some work confidently. And then ironically, when he sends the 12 out, he's like, you know what? If you enter a village and they're not listening to you, what do? Shake the dust off. That's another form of stoicism. It's setting a boundary on crazy. These little phrases, I call them manna. I feel like almost every day I find a little phrase or a word that I'll call manna. And it helps me get through. It's like, oh, this is what's going on. Or, oh, this is why I'm upset. Oh, manna. Manna, these phrases, these wisdoms, live and learn. We all have little phrases that can help us deal with irrational things that can disappoint us and send us spiraling. Wisdom. So when we live our lives and we encounter clouds, that kind of vibe, whether it's within us or outside us, let's remember Jesus told us there would be days like this. Acceptance. And Jesus gives us a toolkit to deal with them. We have tools, wisdom, discernment, good judgment, so that we don't continue to spiral. And these things help us to believe. Believe. It's disbelief and it's belief. And to go after the cloud, to disperse the cloud of disbelief, we are given belief. Belief in a God of righteousness, belief in a God who has a way of goodness, a belief in a God who uses us, a belief in ourselves, independent of what anybody else thinks. We can believe with God's help, the Spirit's help, we can believe in ourselves and believe in our call. It's hard to be a prophet. It's hard to be a mold breaker. It's hard to be ourselves. But we have tools, a tool of discernment, a tool of wisdom that helps us believe and continue to be creative, blessed, safe, and loved. To God be the glory. Amen.